Hello, WiCCD members. My name is Maya Shukeri, and I am WiCCD's Education Committee Director. I'm happy to introduce our series, Finding Your Niche. In this series, we will interview female criminal defense lawyers who practice in a specific area within criminal law. The goal of our series is to highlight the work and accomplishments of female criminal defense lawyers, but it is also a way for us to introduce you to specialty areas within criminal law. We hope we can help you find your niche. Enjoy the series.
Hi, Stephanie. How are you?
I'm well. Hi, Maya. I'm so happy to be here.
Well, I'm very happy to have you as a guest. I'm a huge fan of yours. So I'm really delighted that you're here and you're taking the time out of your very busy schedule to do this for us today. So, Stephanie, for people who don't know you, maybe we can start by having you introduce yourself and tell us a bit more about your firm and what you do.
Sure, absolutely. My name is Stephanie DiGiuseppe. I'm a litigation lawyer practicing in Toronto. I say litigation because I'm mostly a criminal defense lawyer, but I do other work. I'm sure we're going to talk about that a bit today. I'm one of the partners at a firm called Ruby Schiller and Anajor DiGiuseppe. And at this point in time, I'm managing that practice as well as representing my own clients. I'm also a mom to three wonderful girls and a gigantic dog named Snickers who might bark at any point during this recording. And I am a person with a lot of hobbies and just a pretty busy and active person. And I know that that's one of the things you want to talk about today, Maya. And that's just a little bit about me.
All right. Okay, so let's start then with the legal side of things, because you are actually one of these lawyers who do everything in criminal law. You do trials, you do appeals, you argue appeals even at the Supreme Court level, which is very impressive. And I think this is something that a lot of people are interested in and fascinated about. So if you can maybe tell us a bit about that and how did you develop this Supreme Court practice?
Sure. So I started my career doing a lot of long trial work. So a lot of homicide trials as junior counsel, obviously. Did a lot of work with Dirk Durstein, and he was a mentor of mine. I also did a bunch of sort of guns and gangs and project work, and that was sort of my niche for the first at least 7 years of my practice. Then I had my first child. I took maternity leave. And when I came back to criminal law, I went straight into a murder trial in Oshawa. I was commuting every day. I wasn't seeing my kid at all. She was going to bed before I got home in the evenings. And I sort of realized that I would need to practice differently, but still find something I loved that gave me joy and made me feel intellectually stimulated. And I really like, what I really liked about murder trials with it was that they were so complex and they engaged so many different kinds of legal issues. Before that, I had done some appellate work. I wasn't doing a ton of appellate work, but I saw appellate work as a way to do a lot of what I loved about long trials. They're big, long projects, especially if you're doing appellate work, homicide trials or other kinds of complicated trials, which is mostly what I do. And so it was a way to still engage with that, but to have a life that was more manageable and still brought me joy. I ended up going out on my own at that point as well, sort of to get a little bit more control over my own schedule and my practice. And I moved into a chambers with Clayton Ruby. And about 9 months after that, I joined in partnership with Clay and Brian and Anna Maria and Anajor, which has just been a fantastic shift in my life. Through that partnership, I was able to move into some other practice areas, which was another way to do things that I found really interesting and sort of challenge myself. And so I started doing some regulatory work, some administrative work, judicial reviews, that kind of thing. And it's all just been about, I think at the end of the day, finding something that I find fun and challenging, and that I can balance with just where my life is at right now with 3 children, 6 and under. And because being with them and being able to be an active parent to them, that gives me a lot of joy as well. That doesn't mean I'll never do another murder trial. I'm sure I will, but it was really trying to design a life around the phase that I'm in my life, that allowed me to balance those two things that I loved.
Okay, so about the murder trials, so you were originally trial counsel in these trials, in these cases, but then you also you do that also on appeals. So you do appeals of murder cases. So how are these two different? Like, what's the difference between doing the actual homicide trial and the appeal? Are they as complex, or is one easier than the other?
I think they're really challenging in different ways. So I always like to think about it as a trial, like doing surgery on a live patient, and an appeal is like doing an autopsy. And so, trials, and every trial is like this. Long trials are just more sustained. They just go on a lot longer. You've got a patient on the table. You are trying to save their life. Things are getting messy. Veins are bursting. Mistakes are happening. You've got to fix them in real time. It's such a rush. It is such a cool, challenging, energetic experience, exhausting. And every trial is like that. Murder trials are like that for a very long time, as I said. And because they are so zealously prosecuted, there's just a lot more clashes, a lot more evidentiary issues that come up. The disclosure will be very big. There will be a lot of witnesses. And so you're just kind of, I always think about it like you're just sort of getting the whole evidence textbook in one case. Right. You're going to engage with every single chapter. So that's fun. Appeals of those kinds of cases are the autopsy then. And so there's no rush. The patient's already dead. It's a terrible way to think about it, but it's true. The case has been lost usually. And but you are engaged with this other part of the brain, which is trying to look back and find errors. You're still looking at every single page of the evidence textbook, in the sense that you're dealing with all the issues that came up in the trial to see whether anything went wrong. And the big rush comes when you argue it. I always feel like after, a day at the Court of Appeal, like you're almost high when you walk out of the building. You're like walking on air, whether it went well or badly, because it's such a high energy day.
And which one do you prefer?
I hope to always do both. I think I like both. I think being a trial lawyer makes me a better appeal lawyer. Being an appeal lawyer makes me a better trial lawyer. So I like doing both, but I also like the ebbs and flows that it brings into my practice. So I'm not in court every day. I know lots of lawyers who love being in court every day, and I get it. Like, I get the rush. But my practice now ebbs and flows. I'm either really, really seriously in court, and that's all I'm focusing on. And then I'll have weeks in between where I'm in the office and I'm tackling desk problems and writing. And that's how I've achieved work-life balance. It's not the only way, but that's my version of it.
So, okay, speaking of work-life balance, so is it then maybe like, does having a mixed practice of both trials and appeals a good way to achieve that?
I think it is. Appeals are writing heavy. Appellate judges who write on these topics will say things like 90% of your advocacy on an appeal is your factum. And so that means a lot of days in the office where you're reviewing the record, you're writing the factum, and those are flexible days. Those are the kind of days where you get to go to the grocery store and maybe even pop out and do a yoga class or something like that. And those days keep me sane. And then, and I still do trial work. I'm not completely an appellate lawyer. I don't do as many long trials now. I do more the sort of 3-day to 2-week kind of trials. And those are the times when, your energy is up and you're go, 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 and you're not sleeping because there's a legal problem you couldn't solve at 11 p.m. So you're up till 3 a.m. And that's a different kind of fun. But you're
or
not
late
going to,
disclosure, right?
yeah,
Like
exactly. And you're not going to yoga class, and you're definitely not volunteering at your kid's school, right?
well,
You're just 100% law.
tell us more then about, because you have 3 daughters, and it's not easy. I mean, just being a parent is a full-time job, and here you have 2 full-time jobs. You're a full-time lawyer, and you're a full-time mom to 3 very young girls still. So how are you achieving that balance, Stephanie? And do you feel like it's affecting your relationship with your daughters? Like, tell us more about that, because this is actually something that a lot of female lawyers, it's an issue. It's a struggle for some lawyers. It's not easy to achieve the balance when you're a criminal defense lawyer, because it's very demanding. So tell us, how are you managing?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, a lot of the time I'm not, right? I'm not always achieving that balance by any stretch of the word. And I have, days where I'll give you a recent example. Court was offering a continuation for a client whose trial just kept going over. And we took that continuation date. I didn't check my schedule thoroughly enough, and it turned out that it was the same morning as my twin daughter's Christmas concert at school. Okay, so this is like a catastrophe in my world.
Yeah.
Schedule management is probably the most stressful part of my life, and this is like an epic failure. So we went to court. I told the judge, I decided I have to leave by 11 o'clock, which is what the date was set until. I told the judge it's just a hard stop for me at 11 o'clock.
11 a.m. or p.m.?
11 a.m.
Okay.
And that meant if I timed it perfectly, I might get to the end of the Christmas concert.
Yeah.
Everything went wrong. Interpreters didn't show up, the courtroom delays. I ended up not finishing my submissions and not making it to the Christmas concert. I'm like crying in my car, it's just awful. There's a lot of mistakes. Being a lawyer, does it impact my relationship with my girls? I mean, of course, if I wasn't a lawyer, I'd be able to do all the things they want me to do with them, which is everything. They're still in that like precious phase of life where they would want me to sit beside them on the school carpet if I could. But I think at the end of the day, there's good balance. I mean, I work a modified schedule, so I'm up at around 5 or 6 in the morning. I work for an hour. I'm then in the office I drop my kid off at school. I'm in the office from about 9 till 3 on most days. I pick my kids up and spend the evenings with them. Hopefully, there's often phone calls or meetings that interrupt that, but most days. And then I work at night. So do I want to work like this forever? No, it's an intense schedule. But it's working for me right now while they're this young.
Okay. And do you feel that there's any interest from your daughters in the law? Any future lawyer that you can see?
There was a phase where my oldest daughter would get mad every time I was like doing any form of public speaking. So she like even freaked out once when I was giving a toast at my cousin's wedding shower. No, you don't get to speak in the microphone. She's like 3. And I was like, oh my God, she's rebelling against my job. But I don't think that they're quite there yet, but my daughter, my oldest, is a natural performer. And I think law and performance have so much synergy, especially with jury trials. And so I wonder if she'll go that way one day.
And is there some of that performance aspect going back to the law in appellate work?
I think it's more, it's different, but it's not gone. I mean, in front of a jury, there is so much you're doing that is performance based. I don't mean that to say it's not genuine, but just like an actor, you have to be watching your face, thinking about the next thing you're going to say. You have to say things in a certain way to impress them upon a jury. You have to think about not just the message you're communicating, but how you're going to say it, and you know, when you're going to pause dramatically. Like I put notations in my jury addresses, like, you know, long pause, short pause, that kind of thing. So that element is definitely reduced. I think I still, because I'm interested by this idea, I'm interested by storytelling and performance and law. I still try to incorporate some elements of storytelling and performance in front of an appellate court, but it's reduced. The exception to that, I would say, is at the Supreme Court. Mm-hmm. Because at the Supreme Court, you're not just talking to the 9 judges across from you, you're talking to the Canadian public. And so you are thinking a little bit about the way you would communicate this complicated idea to a jury, the kinds of anecdotes you might use to get the average Canadian to connect with the point that you're trying to make, how you might tell them, and you know, to make them more engaging. And so I think some of that comes back a little bit once you get to that level.
And while we're talking about the Supreme Court and your experience there, maybe can you tell us about your first experience at the Supreme Court?
Sure. Well, really, my first experience making submissions at the Supreme Court was in Sullivan and Chan. So,
okay.
So that was as a party. Mm-hmm. Before that, I had only been co-counsel. And so it was an incredible experience. That case came to me it came to me because I had represented Mr. Sullivan at the bail stage. I was on maternity leave for his trial. He had a different trial counsel. I represented him at the Court of Appeal, and it went to the Supreme Court of Canada. So it was kind of just luck that one of my own files made it up there. And it was an incredible experience, a lot of work. It's an incredible amount of work. The amount of time that you spend on the factum, and then the amount of time that you spend on your submissions. I had never experienced anything like that before in my practice. And but it's very cool to be part of something at that level. Yeah. Such a rush of an advocacy experience. And the problems that you're engaging with are really interesting, because you're not just dealing with a judge or a panel of judges who's interested in getting the law right and getting, you know, the right factual solution for your client, but you're dealing with a judicial body that's concerned about the entire country of Canada, very concerned about policy issues, very concerned about paramountcy between themselves and Parliament. Just a whole new host of issues.
Yeah, the level is different here. Yeah.
So much.
It's not just about the case and your client. It's about the whole country being affected by this case.
Yeah, and in Sullivan and Chan, we had a ton of media interest, which added a whole other dimension as well. And a lot of wrestling with the question of, you know, what's right for the country of Canada going forward. So really a very cool experience.
And you had a very cool result. Congratulations. That was a really good case. So great job, Stephanie. And one thing that I don't know, I don't think we really talked too much about that is, how did you become a criminal lawyer?
Yeah, that's a great question. I wonder about that sometimes myself. I don't want to say it wasn't a passion or an interest of mine for a long time, because it definitely was. I won like a high school law award for my law class, and they gave us a stack of books. Some of them are like Red Rum the Innocent, like books about wrongful convictions of Guy Paul Moran and Stephen Truscott. And I just devoured those books. So clearly there was a really strong interest, but I, you know, thought I might be an English professor or a writer. I wasn't really sure. And I was like backpacking in Thailand, and there were no cell phones then. I'm
Yeah.
giving away my age. I like called my parents from a payphone. My mom was like, "It's the deadline to accept law school." What do you want to do? I was like, "Okay, I think we should accept." And thankfully, that's what I did. And then my interest in criminal law just built from there.
So did your parents want you to go into law school?
I don't know that they pushed it so much. They definitely thought that I liked to talk a lot. So
Okay. But you could be an English teacher, right? If you like to talk.
yeah, I think that they thought that it was a natural fit for me because I liked to talk and I like to argue. I did a lot of debating in high school in particular. And so there was like a natural fit element to it, certainly for me. And maybe thinking that I would be an English professor was really just a bit of rebellion against my true self.
But actually, I wanted to ask you because you mentioned right now that you like to argue, and I mean that's what we do as lawyers, right? Like we're always arguing, we're defending a position or raising a point. But what I really admire about you in particular, Stephanie, is that you are very strong in arguing and making a point, but your style is also like it's not an aggressive style. It's a very convincing style, very firm style, but without being like the very annoying style. Sometimes some people are too, dramatic in the way they argue. I really like how you achieve that balance. So maybe if you can just tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah. Um, I think that I've always thought that the best way to convince people is to talk to them like we're not in a courtroom. So I try to, in my courtroom style, obviously, there's differences in a courtroom. You're using jurisprudence and stuff like that. But in my courtroom style, I try to just have a conversation with the judge. Uh, and I think that that's convincing. It's also just much more natural for me in terms of my personality. I'm not a particularly um,
Confrontational.
confrontational or
Yeah.
aggressive person. I stand up
Yeah.
for what I believe is right, but I'd rather get along with other human beings. And I appreciate that people have different perspectives. They have a different role in the system. That our system is about discourse and trying to find the right result out of clashing opinions. So I've just never really felt the need to get angry, unless I'm faced with what is clearly unfair and true injustice, in which case I'll be emphatic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you definitely have a very nice style whether it's in public speaking, at conferences and presentations. I personally love when you're a speaker at a conference because I just like listening to how you present, and you're an excellent lawyer. Maybe
That's
one
so
final,
kind.
but one final question for you, Stephanie, because you did mention that you have a lot of hobbies. So tell us maybe a bit more about your hobbies. I don't
Sure.
know about your hobbies.
Sure. Well, you might have got the clue that I'm very into yoga.
Yeah.
I like, it's winter now. I like to ski. I like to write. I'm part of I'm not, I'm not very prolific because I write so much of my job, but I have a creative writing group of women that I meet with biweekly. And I love to read. Probably read like 3 or 4 nonfiction books a month, which I think is pretty good considering
How do you have time? I
how
mean,
much
with all the
time.
appellate, yeah.
Yeah, so I love all of that stuff, and it's an important part of my life and keeping me happy and making sure that this job is one part of a good life. So I just try to make time for all of that. But I should say at the end, when you ask that question, I have a lot of help. Like, I have a fantastic team of lawyers and support staff working at Ruby Schiller, who are so smart and so capable and help me so much. I have, my husband is very supportive. And so when I say my schedule goes like this, his schedule goes like this. When
Yeah.
I'm busy, he steps up, and when I'm less busy, that's when he does his bursts of work, because he also has a challenging job. So I've been very lucky to have that kind of help and support to allow me to do those things and not go crazy.
Yeah, well, it's very nice to see a very successful and accomplished woman like you. It's really very inspiring. And you also happen to be a very nice person on top of all of that. So it's really very,
I mean, to every single thing you just said, I have to say likewise. I feel the exact same way
well,
about
I
you.
haven't
Thank you
accomplished,
very much.
yet what you've accomplished. So I look up to you. It's very, like it's very, very inspiring, Stephanie. So I want to thank you so much for taking the time today to talk a bit about your work, your life, and opening up a bit so we can get to know more about Stephanie, Giuseppe. And thank you. I know you're very busy, and that you taking this time, it means a lot. So thank you, Stephanie.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for doing this great series where we get to see into the lives of women in law. I think it's a fantastic series. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Stephanie.